Shri Ramanaya. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. We begin today's satsang with a prayer, which will be followed by Muktaka trayam by Sri Nandakumarji. Dakshinamurti Sarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Ramanacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Vande Guru Paramparam Vande Guru Paramparam Shuklam Varadharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarvavighnopashantaye Angikam Bhuvanam Yasya Vachikam Sarvavangmayam Aharyam Chandrataradi Tam Namah Satvikam Shivam. Namo Ramana.
Ekam aksharam hrudi nirantaram bhasate swayam likyate katham hridaya kuhara madhye kevalam brahmamatram yaham maham iti sakshat atmarupena bhati hridi vishamanasa swam Chilvata Majjata Pavana Chalana Rodha Atmanishto Bhavatvam Deham Brahmaya Jadatmakam Aham Buddhiratasyastyato Naham Tattata Bhava Shukti Samaya Siddhartha Sattva Toham bhavayuta kuto varadhiya drishtatmanishtatmana soham spurtitaya Arunachala Shiva Purno Vibhati Swayam Soham Spurtitaya Arunachala Shiva Purno Viभाति Swayam. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the chanting of Upadesa Saram by Uma and Ashwini.
Namo Ramana. Idamaham pada vidyamanvaham ahamilina ketyalaya sattaya vigrahendriya pranaditama nahamekasat tajjadam yasat satvabhasika chitkovetara sattaya hi चित्तया ह्यहम् ईश जीवयोर्वेषधीभिदा सत्स्वभावतो वस्तु केवलम् वेषः नत स्वात्मदर्शनम् ईश दर्शनम् स्वात्मरूपत आत्मसंस्थिति स्वात्मदर्शनम् आत्मनिर्द्वयादात्मनिष्ठता ज्ञानवर्जिता अज्ञानहीन चेत् ज्ञानमस्ति किं ज्ञातुमन्तरम् किं स्वरूपम् इत्यात्मदर्शने अव्यया भवा अपूर्णचित्सुखम् बन्धमुक्त्यतीतं परं सुखम् विन्दति ह जीवस्तु दैविक अहमपेतकम् निज विभानकम् महदिदं तपो रमणवागियम्. नमो रमण.
Namo Ramana. We will now have two songs from Ramananjali Sangeetam, one presented by Srimati V. Radha, which will be followed by a song by Revathi Shankar.
Namo Ramana to all. This is a Namavali written by Sri Sadhu Om Swami, and the music is by Srimati Sulochana Natarajan. Jaya Ramana Guru Shri Ramana Arunachala Shiva Shri Ramana. Jaya Ramana Guru Shri Ramana Arunachala Shiva Shri Ramana. देव देव करुणा करने भवदीन बंधुवे श्री रमणा. देव देव करुणा करने भवदीन बंधवे श्री रमणा. पापनाश परमेश्वर भगवान पाहि पाहि गुरु श्री रमणा. जय रमणा गुरु श्री रमणा अरुणाचल शिव श्री रमणा. अरुणशैल अवतार स्वरूप अमल ज्ञान गुरु श्री रमणा. अरुणशैल अवतार स्वरूप अमल ज्ञान गुरु श्री रमणा. करुणை மாறி பொழி ஞான கடாட்ச कामनाश शिवने रमणा. जय रमणा गुरु श्री रमणा अरुणाचल शिव श्री रमणा. உண்மை ஞான சுகமே உருவாய் இவ் உலகமுற்ற குருவே ரமணா. உண்மை ஞான சுகமே உருவாய் இவ் உலகமுற்ற குருவே ரமணா. எண்ணமற்ற விழிப்பாகிய இன்ப ஏகபோக ரமணா ரமணா. எண்ணமற்ற விழிப்பாகிய இன்ப ஏகபோக ரமணா ரமணா. ஜெய ரமணா குரு ஸ்ரீ ரமணா அருணாச்சல சிவ ஸ்ரீ ரமணா. ஜெய ரமணா குரு ஸ்ரீ ரமணா அருணாச்சல சிவ ஸ்ரீ ரமணா. அருணாச்சல சிவ ஸ்ரீ ரமணா அருணாச்சல சிவ ஸ்ரீ ரமணா. நமோ ரமண.
Namaste Shri Ramanaya. Bhagavan was born to Sundaramayyar and Alagammal. Sundaram means beautiful. Alagu means beautiful. To the beautiful pious couple, this beautiful one was born. And he went to the beautiful mountain, to the call of the beautiful mountain, which had no beginning or no end. And the whole Veda describes the peak of this beautiful one's experience. The experience of the self was given by beautiful Ramana to all of us. And he makes us cross all the difficulties, all the obstructions which we have in life. And he makes our life very beautiful. I present to you a song written by Muruganar Swami, Kannada translation by Dr. N.S. Lakshminarayana Bhatta, music by Rangarao. ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂತ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂತ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ಮೊದಲಿಲ್ಲದ ತುದಿಯಿಲ್ಲದ ಆನಂದದ ಚೆಲುವು ಮೊದಲಿಲ್ಲದ ತುದಿಯಿಲ್ಲದ ಆನಂದದ ಚೆಲುವು ಮೇರೆ ಮೀರಿ ಹರಿಯಲದೆ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣನ ಚೆಲುವು ಮೇರೆ ಮೀರಿ ಹರಿಯಲದೆ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣನ ಚೆಲುವು ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂಥ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ಭವಾವಳಿಯ ಕಡಲ ನಳೆವ ಸೇತುವೆಯ ಚೆಲುವು ಭವಾವಳಿಯ ಕಡಲ ನಳೆವ ಸೇತುವೆಯ ಚೆಲುವು ಬಾಗಿದ ಭಕ್ತರ ಬಾಳನು ಬೆಂಬಲಿಸುವ ಚೆಲುವು ಬಾಗಿದ ಭಕ್ತರ ಬಾಳನು ಬೆಂಬಲಿಸುವ ಚೆಲುವು ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂಥ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ಕಾಣ್ಕೆಯ ಗಡಿಯಾಚೆ ತುಂಬಿ ನಿಂತ ಪೂರ್ಣ ಚೆಲುವು ಕಾಣ್ಕೆಯ ಗಡಿಯಾಚೆ ತುಂಬಿ ನಿಂತ ಪೂರ್ಣ ಚೆಲುವು ತುಂಬಿ ತುಳುಕು ಆನಂದದ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣನ ಚೆಲುವು ತುಂಬಿ ತುಳುಕು ಆನಂದದ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣನ ಚೆಲುವು ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂಥ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ನಾದಬಿಂದು ಕಲಾತೀತ ಎನಿಸಿದಂಥ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು ವೇದರಾಶಿ ವರ್ಣಿಸಿದ ತುತ್ತ ತುದಿಯ ಚೆಲುವು. Namo Ramana. We will now have the reading and sharing from the book Forever is in the Now by Sri Nandakumarji.
Namo Ramana. In this our book reading segment, we have been reading from the book Forever is in the Now, the timeless message of Sri Ramana Maharshi, edited and compiled and also contributed to by our founder president Sri A.R. Natarajanji. We have been into the account of Ramanananda, Sadananda, and we have to complete the last few paragraphs. He has been giving an account of children's experiences and expressions, of which he had given account of his own daughter Lakshmi, and we go on to other bhaktas. When a certain relative and disciple of Bhagavan said, "O Lord, how is it that some advanced souls do not feel hunger and thirst for days and months together while in meditation?" The blessed Lord replied, "During the day, you take your food 5 or 6 times, cooked rice, vegetables, fruits, etc., at breakfast, tiffin, dinner, and other hours, at frequent intervals. In the night, you have only one meal and you sleep all the rest of the hours. The duration of the night is not shorter than that of the day, and yet, what makes you eat less in the night? Your mind is absorbed in sleep, and so your body stands in less need of food. Even so, the meditating sage has his mind merged in some other thing. The thing has a capital T for a long time, say days, months, or even years. That is why the latter, the sage, feels no need for food for a long time while in meditation. Mr. Seshu Iyer, a Kokanada pleader and a good bhakta who has translated Ulladu Narpadu and Nanyar into English, informed me last year of the occurrence of another event equally interesting. When during one of our usual daily visits to the Lord, the cow named Lakshmi, who has now settled down at the ashram itself, touched him with her head and waited for a present. Bhagavan asked for some plantain fruits to be given to her, but no fruit was available then. Within a minute of the Lord's demand, 2 big baskets full of excellent, delicious plantain fruits from some hills near Payani were received by the ashramites, who had the satisfaction of obeying the Lord's command and feeding the cow at once. We have seen this account from another devotee also earlier. It was in Skandashram that Bhagavan once asked me to take up and read a particular stanza in Jnana Vasishtam, the purport of which was that the thirst for the acquisition of 8 great miraculous powers is an obstacle to Atma Jnana. I was wondering why the Lord should ask me to read the stanza then, for I was sure that such thoughts, that is acquiring the 8 siddhis, did not occur to me at that time, nor did I consider myself fit to be the recipient of such powers. But when Bhagavan left us for a moment, Ishwara Swami, who was the only other person present at that time, then remarked, when once the siddhis are attained, it will be difficult to resist the temptation to at least to fly so far as the heights of the Himalayas. Now it was clear to me that Bhagavan, who could easily divine all men's thoughts without any effort, gave the warning advisedly. It is the abundance of His mercy that saves and sets us on the track when we are about to be misled by mirage-like attractions or obstacles in our pursuit of Atma Jnana. Probably he had a wish to travel to some faraway place in the Himalayan ranges. Conclusion. It was in May 1925, I think, that a certain Andhra graduate who was related to Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni was wondering about something when I unconsciously dispelled some of his difficulties. I had given him a very satisfactory answer to a question which he did not put to me, though, as he told me afterwards, he had tried in vain for 3 days to get it answered by Bhagavan, whom he, being a stranger, felt it rather delicate to approach and request for an answer. I assured him during that Giri Pradakshina performance with the Lord that it was not the first time that people at the ashram gave appropriate and satisfactory answers, even without knowing or anticipating the questions. For the Lord, being the indwelling spirit in all, He need not necessarily reply Himself. He may make anybody remove the doubts of any other body, even before the latter gives expression to his difficulty. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. We go on to the next account by Dada J.P. Vaswaniji. Dada J.P. Vaswaniji, head of the spiritual center, Sadhu Vaswani Mission, Pune, and prolific writer of spiritual literature. I remember Devaraj Mudaliar, I think, or was it Balram Reddy Garu, who writes about a visit of Dada there to the ashram. There, Balram Reddy Garu is observing Mauna, and Bhagavan has the Mauna of speech. And though he knew J.P. Vaswani sir, Dada, he did not introduce him or make him introduce to the officials or to Bhagavan. And Dada Vaswaniji had come and silently remained in the hall and had left. And Balram Reddy Garu mentioned this the next day, and Bhagavan takes it as an opportunity to correct Balram Reddy Garu in his sadhana. I have always told you that the mere mauna of speech and all is not required. It is the mauna of the ahankar, the taking it to the source. That is the key. See, you could have made him more comfortable or introduced him to us. We are seeing an account of the great one, Dada J.P. Vaswaniji, on the title is Shri Bhagavan. Shri Bhagavan, Dada J.P. Vaswaniji. It was my great good fortune to have had a darshan of Shri Bhagavan, to have sat in his purifying presence, to have gazed into the liquid depths of his mystic, luminous, compassion-filled eyes, to have listened to his words of wisdom, which centered around the one question, which indeed is a question of all questions, the one eternal question, which if you once answer, you will have no more questions to answer. The one question, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? This happened in 1939, 42 years ago. He sat in the ashram hall. He sat on a wooden couch. He sat in silence, and at his feet sat a few devotees. Even as I went and sat in the midst of the devotees, I recalled to my mind a picture which I had seen several years earlier. It was the picture of Sanat Kumar, the eternal youth, seated on a raised platform, and at the feet of this young teacher sat a number of old rishis with white flowing beards, and underneath the picture were written the words, "The teacher sits in silence, his teaching is silence, and the disciples' doubts are cleared." Shri Bhagavan sat in silence. His teaching was silence. Many came to him, many from the east and some from the west. They came bringing 100 questions and 100 doubts in their hearts. But no sooner did they enter into the purifying presence than their minds were stilled. They were filled with a strange feeling of peace. They forgot their questions and their doubts. But from where can I bring the silence of Shri Bhagavan? His silence was so profound. His silence was sublime. His silence was so unique. These are the words of Shri Bhagavan. He says, the Guru's silence is more vast and more emphatic than all the scriptures put together. I'll read that again, quoted by Shri Vaswaniji. These words are of Shri Bhagavan. He says, the Guru's silence is more vast and more emphatic than all the scriptures put together. You may read all the Shastras that are in the world, but what you will gain by the study will be nothing as compared to what you will gain by a few words sitting at the feet of the self-realized Guru like Shri Ramana Maharshi. Shri Bhagavan's silence was not passive. His silence was utter and complete. It was the silence of the head and the heart put together. It was the silence of feeling and emotions and thoughts. We may stand in silence, but our minds are scattered, and within us there is all the time the noise of unruly passion. Within us there is the clamor of conflicting desires. The master's silence was deep. It was the silence which is in the depths of the realized soul. Sri Bhagavan realized God, but he did not forsake humanity. He came and lived in the midst of men to share with them the treasures of the Spirit. He spoke in the language of the masses. He lived as the simplest among them. Look at his picture. It is there before you, clad in but one loin cloth, barely enough to hide his utter nakedness. From morn till eve and sometime late in the night, the people thronged around him. Everyone was welcome. Everyone had free access to him. He was a friend alike of the sinner and the saint, of the peasant and the prince, of the young and the old, of the educated and the uneducated, of man and woman. Indeed, he was a friend of all creation. He was a friend of all who breathe the breath of life. He was a friend of the faithful dog. He was a friend of monkeys and squirrels and peacocks. He was a friend of everyone. He was a friend of all and of the hundreds of people who came to him. He showed to them that he was their intimate friend. He took personal interest in their matters such as the train by which they came, the food they ate, the deaths or marriages that had occurred in their families. Sri Bhagavan said all spiritual paths could be brought together under two main categories. The first is the category which is known as self-enquiry, Atma Vichara. Ask yourself the question, who am I? Sitting in silence, entering into the silence of your being, put to yourself the question again and again, who am I? And then, as you come, see and stand on the battlefield of life, as you attend your daily tasks, as you fulfill your daily obligations, let this question, the question of all questions, be there in the background of your consciousness. Who am I? Who am I? Koham. As you sit in silence, you find that there is a seemingly endless procession of thoughts which have nothing to do with this fundamental question. They come and crowd into your mind. Sri Bhagavan has given us an effective method of slaying this entire army of thoughts. Sri Bhagavan has said, whenever a question arises within, you ask yourself, to whom does this question arise? The answer naturally will be to me. Then ask yourself again, who is that me? Who is that I? Every time that you put this question, you will find that a thought which has come to lead you astray will itself slink away. With this one question, strike down every other thought. Until the blessed day, you will find, until one blessed day, you will find that the mind will be merged in the heart, where shines the true self, the divine self, the real I of I. Through abhyasa, through persistent practice, the mind can be merged in its source. The lower ego, the lower self, the empirical ego will vanish, and alone the true self will remain. This is the first path, the first main category. But there is another category, another main category, which Sri Bhagavan called the way of self-surrender, the way of Sharanagati. Surrender yourself to the universal, said Sri Bhagavan, and you will be absorbed in the universal. You will become one with the universal. In one of his most moving songs, there are words on which I have meditated. And as I have meditated on those words, my eyes have been touched with tears. Chepi Vaswaniji is saying, in one of his most moving songs, there are words on which I have meditated, and as I have meditated on those words, my eyes have been touched with tears. Sri Bhagavan says, I came to swallow you, but you have swallowed me. Now there is peace between us, Arunachala. Sapadunnai Sardunavaya Shantamai Povan Arunachala. Sri Bhagavan, it is commonly believed, was a jnani. It is true, he was a jnani, of the highest order that the world has ever known. Sri Bhagavan, it is true, was a jnani, but every true jnani, remember, is at the same time a bhakta and a karma yogi. Sri Bhagavan said, cast all your cares on the Lord, throw all your burdens at his lotus feet. Remember, the Lord of the universe is the one. Remember, the Lord of the universe is the one. Those are the words of Sri Bhagavan, and every word that he uttered came out of the depths of his own realization. Remember, the Lord of the universe is the one who carries all the burdens. Why must you carry your burden yourself? I am reminded, my friends, of a little boy in our school at Pune. When the school was about to break for summer vacation, the talk was given to the students. They were asked to be kind and compassionate towards brother animals and birds. They were asked to see that horses and bullocks were not overburdened. And one of the students on the next day moved on in a tonga to the railway station. He had to go to a place outside Pune. He was sitting with his mother, and the mother found that this little boy carried his trunk on his knees. And the mother asked him, "My boy, does this contain something very precious that you keep it on your knees?" The boy said, "No, mummy. Yesterday we were given the teaching in school that we must see that the horses are not overburdened, and I am therefore sharing the burden of the horse." And the mother said to him, "Foolish child, do you not know that your burden and all the burden that you can carry is ultimately being pulled by the horse?" In this path of self-realization, there are 4 important things to be considered by everyone who treads the path. The very first is practice of silence. You must enter into silence. You may have a number of things to do, a number of works to attend to, but remember, the work of all works, the needful work is this, practice of silence, practice of silence. To Maharishi Sri Ramana, to Bhagavan, there came one day a collector and a deputy collector. The collector started speaking about himself, about all the books that he had read and the sadhanas that he had performed, and yet he complained that he had not attained peace. He kept on talking for several minutes together, and no sooner did the collector finish speaking, the deputy collector started his story, and he went on speaking for several minutes together. There he sat before the very picture of silence, and the collector, seeing that Sri Bhagavan did not speak one single word, he was put out. He was a collector after all. He said to Bhagavan, "What is this? We have spoken for about an hour, but not one word has come out of your lips. Speak to us at least a few words." Maharishi Ramana, with that beautiful smile illuminating his eyes, said to him, "I have been speaking to you in my language, but when will you understand?" The significance of this cryptic reply was understood by the collector, and immediately he prostrated before Sri Bhagavan. Then both of them sat in silence at his feet, and when they arose, they said their hearts was filled with a wondrous peace. As I said to you, the very first point in the path, in the way of self-realization, is the practice of silence. Practice of silence every day. And at the second point that is emphasized in the way of self-realization, the second point, how shall I refer to it? The second point is tapasya. The physical body must be controlled so that it may become a worthy instrument of the Atman. It may become a channel for the flow of the forces of the spirit. When the question was put to Sri Bhagavan, what are the rules of conduct for a seeker and aspirant in the path? Sri Bhagavan's answer, his answers were always brief and clear, said, moderation in food, moderation in sleep, moderation in talk, moderation in food, moderation in sleep, moderation in talk. The third point, first point is practice of silence, second point is tapasya, that is moderation in food, moderation in sleep, moderation in talk. The third point emphasized in the way of self-realization is the longing, deep yearning of the heart Longing is needed, deep yearning of the heart is needed, yearning to behold the self, the divine self. You must cry out to the Lord, even as a child cries out to its mother. Even so must you cry to the Lord and ask Him to so bless you that you too may be able to behold the beauty and the grandeur and effulgence and the radiance of the self divine. What wondrous love Sri Bhagavan had for the poor and broken ones, forsaken and forlorn. When the ashram had not yet been built, when only a few devotees were with him, he found that some low-caste women returned from their work every day in the heat of the noonday sun, but their throats were parched with thirst. They wanted water, but because they belonged to a low caste, they were not allowed to draw water from the well. Sri Bhagavan himself, Sri Bhagavan, what was his stature? But he himself would come and stand there at the time when the low caste women returned from their work. He would come and stand by the side of the well, and with his own holy hands, he would draw water and he would pour it into the open palms of the women, and they would drink and quench their thirst. Swami, Swami, we are thirsty. Give us a little water, and he gave them the water. I sometimes feel that I am like those low caste women. And again, turning to the gracious face of Maharishi Ramana, I say to him, Swami, give me the water of life. And he will give it to every aspiring heart. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We will have the sharing of thoughts on self-enquiry and the practice of self-enquiry by Sri Dileep Simha.
Namo Ramana. Dhyayet Sharada Chandra Sundaramukam Tamraravindeksham Bhaktabhishtabharabhayapradakaram Kaupinamotrojvalam Svatmanandarasanubhuti vivasham Sarvanavadyangakam Shrimantam Shri Ramaneshwaram Guruganam Yogasanadhyasitam Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Dhyayet Shri Ramaneshwaram Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahmamatram Yahamaham Sakshat Atmarupena Bhati Hrudi Vishamanasa Swam Chinvata Machatava Pavana Chalanarodha Atmanishtu Bhavatvam. Namo Ramana. We will commence the evening Atma Vicharam by listening to Bhagavan's Upadesham and meditating on it by His grace. I'll be reading Bhagavan's Upadesham from Guru Vachaka Kovai from the chapter Meditation on the Truth. The topic is Waking and Dream. Verse 560. The answer: dreams appear and disappear in a few seconds, but the waking state endures for a long period of time, is given merely as a reply when the question is raised. The question only arises as a consequence of the trickery activities that came from association with the mind, which is Maya. I repeat the verse. The answer: dreams appear and disappear in a few seconds, but the waking state endures for a long period of time, is given merely as a reply when the question is raised. The question only arises as a consequence of the trickery activities that come from association with the mind, which is Maya. Here, Bhagavan is throwing light that it is only when the mind, when it is awake, which is in the waking and dream, is all these trickery activities of it goes about. So even if a question is put to it, rather than tracing the source of it, it will try to find another answer or justify or counter that answer with another doubt and continue to keep us in its fist. So here, a true devotee would only has to understand that if the mind, it is only when the mind is arised, that is the only state where we experience the waking and the dream. So any further engagement in answering any question in this waking and dream is only keeping the waking and the dream going on. And therefore, as Nandakumarji beautifully read out to us, we should take the practice only to the silence. Abide as the self, which alone is, that's it. And there is nothing else apart from it. All answers, all other ways is only continuing the waking dream, continuing the actual dream. So silence is the real practice, says Bhagavan. Otherwise, we have fallen in the trickery of the Maya. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, with which alone we have come to this most direct path. No matter how many thoughts rise, whatever may be the nature of those thoughts, we have to understand that it is the Jiva Bhava, the individual notion, which has arisen in all that ways. And only the job that we need to do is surrender that bhava back to the self. And the moment we surrender it, then the self alone rises and shines. For that, Bhagavan has given us this Atma Vichara. In Atma Vichara, no matter how many thoughts rise, we continue to offer it as the flower to the lotus feet of the self, the Sadguru, Ramana. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, for the next 10 minutes, let us do Atma Vichara.
the sharing of Guru Stuti by Sri Venkatesh Deshpande ji.
Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Dhyanamoolam Gurur Murti Puja Moolam Gurur Padam Mantramulam Gurur Vakyam Mokshamulam Gurur Kripa. Namo Ramana, by Bhagwan's immense grace, we take on the next book called the Atma Bodha. So I have got some inputs from Nandakumar and some notes he had with interactions with A. Parthasarathi. So I'll be reading some of that too as part of the sharing that we're going to have in the weeks to follow. So what does Atma Bodha mean? Atma Bodha means self-knowledge, self-awareness, or one with the possession of a knowledge of the soul or the Supreme Spirit. So that's what we have all been talking about, that where is this, why are we not able to experience the self which is closest to us? Is because of the knowledge of we really do not have knowledge of that. So that's what we are going to be doing then the weeks and months to follow. The Atma Bodha is an original composition of Adi Shankaracharya. Adi Shankaracharya is an outstanding figure in the Hindu tradition. Shankara, as he was popularly known, was born in 788 AD at Kalarani, a village in the west coast of India. We'll just share, it's good to do manana on Shankara also, so then we get to his teachings. He hailed from an orthodox Brahmin, Nambudri family. Early in his life, he took to celibacy and renunciation. He did not choose the institution of marriage and family life. Compelled by his spiritual urge, he went in search of a guru and found Sri Govinda Bhagavad Pada in the Himalayas. This great master initiated him to the tenets of non-dualistic Advaita philosophy. That's what we normally do manana on. Shankara had a precious intellect. He mastered the deep philosophy and the Sanskrit language. The Guru blessed him with the order of sannyasa. Shankara elevated the Hindu scriptures to a place of pride. He brought out their non-dualistic Advaitic contents in his commentary. He made the most abstract analysis, the most meticulous examination of the phenomena of matter and spirit. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Reality in the process of he outwitted and silenced every disputation scholar who chose to cross swords with him. As a devotee, Bhakta, Shankara was imbibed with boundless compassion, faith and devotion. So we always sometimes we think, oh, should we have only Jnana Yoga? But you can have Jnana, you can have Bhakti, and you can have Karma all together. That's what is being said here. Shankara was imbibed with boundless compassion, faith and devotion. He possessed the caliber of a Tukaram, a Kabir, or a Ramdas. The same genius who employed abstract and passionless thought in establishing the non-dualistic philosophy. The union of knowledge and devotion in Shankara was by itself a rare achievement. There was yet another facet of his personality, his tireless and dynamic action, karma, when he was hardly 16 years old. Shankara sent out his missionary work. He traveled the length and breadth of the country and on foot and by bullock cart. In these travels he met and won over to his side scholars and pundits with diagrammatically opposite views. So some people had different views. So Shankara brought them, and we in our last Guru Stuti also we did manana on that. So Shankara's literary works are classified under three main groups: the bhashyas, the stotras, and the prakaranas. So commentaries, the bhashyas are commentaries on the three basic institutes of the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, which go by the name of Prashanta Traya. The stotras, devotional songs or hymns of praise, and then the prakaranas, the expository and dialectical works in prose and poetry, which enunciate and elucidate certain terms and expressions in the scriptures. Atmabodha is one of the prakaranas composed by Shankara. It helps the student to comprehend the subtle theme of the scriptures. It portrays a cross-section of the planet life expounded by the sages. It is a picture gallery of several word paintings, each depicting a philosophical idea. Shankara has used many metaphors taken from the nature and life. Such practical examples remind the layman of the higher reality in all walks of life. The awareness leads him to the realization of the Supreme Self. So let's try and understand there's an introduction also. Let's try and understand what this is all about. A human being is composed of spirit and matter. The spirit is your real self, the Godhead. Within the matter in you is in the form of the physical body, mind and intellect. Physical body is the equipment through which you perceive and act. Mind is the equipment in which your emotions play. Intellect is the equipment in which your discrimination functions. These three equipments are per se inert and insentient. These three equipments, that's the mind, the body, mind, and the intellect, they are per se inert and insentient. The Godhead within is the life principle which enlivens the material components. So that's what in the Ekashloki Bhagavan also says, Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam Brahma Matram. So that is that Godhead which Shankara says enlivens the material components. It is the sentient principle which sends sentiency to the otherwise insentient matter layers. This life spark which gives life to the inert matter is the real self. It is called Atman in Sanskrit language. So as we understand this very well, so now we will try and understand what Atmabodha. Atmabodha literally means the knowledge of the self. It shows the way to self-realization. So this Atmabodha is 68 verses and can be divided into 8 topics. Each topic carries a different summary. This categorization should help you to follow the sequence of thought and grasp the overall message in the text. So this has 68 verses that we will be doing manana on. So I'll basically highlight some of the, what are these 8 areas. First is the knowledge of the self alone liberates mankind. So he says this is in verses 1 to 5. Spiritual practices, sadhana, are not the ultimate in gaining supreme liberation. They are the means and not the end in themselves. Knowledge of self alone wipes out ignorance and liberates human beings. So this is beautifully being said. Here's that only knowledge of self alone will wipes out ignorance and liberates human beings. Point number 2, the chapter 2 is material equipments superimpose world on Brahman. This we all know very well. The verses 6 to 15 deals with this. Brahman is one homogeneous and eternal reality. It admits no plurality. It appears as pluralistic world of things and beings because of its association with the material equipments, namely the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. These equipments superimpose the world and its properties on Brahman. As long as you experience the world, it appears real to you. When you transcend the limitations of your material equipments, by gaining knowledge of yourself, you realize herewith that the world is a mere illusory projection upon the reality. So that's the verses 6 to 15. The third group is by the discriminative self-analysis, separate the self from the material equipments, verses 16 to 29. The self is the core of the human being. It is a supreme eternal. It has no activities. In its presence, the matter layers get activated, but none of the activities affect it in any way. The ignorant presume the self to be acting. To gain the knowledge of the self, must first go through the process of self-analysis to discriminate and separate the self from the matter that envelops it. The fourth is that through the process of negation, neti, and assertion and meditation, realize the self. That is the verses 30 to 40. Through the process of negation, you suggest to yourself that you are not the body, mind, and intellect. You have nothing to do with the sense, objects, emotions, and thoughts. At the same time, you assert your own self to be the reality, to be omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. That's the fourth. The fifth is the knowledge destroys ignorance, which reveals itself. That is the verses 41 to 46. As you acquire knowledge of the higher through the aforesaid practices, your ignorance reduces. The last traces of ignorance are removed by single-pointed meditation. And the sixth is the self-realized merges with the Brahman. That is verses 47 to 53. When you realize your supreme self, you become one with the all-pervading Brahman. You are freed from the limitations of the gross, subtle, and causal bodies. Then let's go to the seventh. What does seventh say? The nature of the Brahman, verses 54 to 64. You reach the state of Brahman when you enter the plane of consciousness. It is a state of self-consciousness or God consciousness. This state is beyond the waking, dream, and deep sleep states of consciousness. And the eighth one is knowledge of self reveals Brahman, verses 65 to 68. Through study, reflection, and meditation, you exhaust your vasanas and discover your real self. Your real self effort alone leads you to the knowledge of the self. When you discover your inner self, you experience the infinite, all-pervading Brahman. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. We'll continue to do Manana on the verses from next Saturday, and before that we will do the invocation also. Thank you.
We will now have sharing of Devikalotha Jnana Vichara Padalam by Dr. Kalarani Rengasamy.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Arunachalamena agame ninippavar agathai veraruppai Arunachalam. Namo Ramana to all.
With the abundance grace of Bhagavan, we are meditating on Devi Kalotra Jnana Vichara Padalam, very graciously given to us by Bhagavan in Tamil. And in the Lord Satsang we saw, when we are awake, we find different Nama Rupas in the world. In deep sleep, we don't see that different Nama Rupas. But in all the three states, Jagrata, Swapna and Susupti, the self alone shines and it does not depend on anything to shine. Sarva Ubadiyum Saradu Ulachittu Uruvam Yedu Undru Uladu. That Chit Swarupam which shines of its own without having attachments towards the Namarupa in which it resides is the other name of me. Anda Chivam Aham Endre. So meditate on me alone. Nirandaram Anbal Dhyanite. Concentrate on me ever. Nirandaram Anbal Dhyanite. Yenda Achityu Ni Etre. To realize the self, Chit Swarupa, what is needed? The love for it and the curiosity to know the Anma. That is very necessary. A great saint, Manikavasagar, beautifully says, Ullam Tal Nindru Uchi Adave Nenjai Urugada. The heart must melt down of love towards Shiva. So concentrate the mind on Shiva, because giving attention to the worldly objects and reaching to the worldly happenings, reacting to the worldly happenings, what will happen? That will bring only sorrow. Moreover, it paves the way for desire and aspiration. Not satisfied with anything. I'll tell you an example. A Bhakta, he was praying to Sri Krishna daily. Oh, great one! You are so divine and capable of giving anything to me, and I need so many things in the world. Why don't you make arrangements so that I get those things which I wanted? Daily, this was his prayer for years together. Krishna at last sent a Devaduta to that Bhakta. And Devaduta also came to that Bhakta and asked him what he wanted. And the Bhakta said, see, I have been applying for a government job for many times, but I'm not getting it. Okay, you will get a government job. Next, I want a house to live. And he got the house also. Next, he said, what is this house? It is empty. I want some furniture. Furnish this house. Beautiful. Okay, done. House was furnished. Can I go now? No. Wait. Why are you in a hurry? How will I live alone in this big house? It's like a palace. I want a wife. Okay, a beautiful girl came as his wife. Right, all good. Now can I leave? Bhakta was thinking for some time, but nothing came to his mind. At last, he said, for time being, this is enough. Okay, but in the future, I may require something. So, what you are doing is, when I was asking different things, you were showing one of your fingers like this, isn't it? Yes, I did so. Then I got what all I wanted, isn't it? Yes, that was the real thing. So what you are doing is, please give me that finger alone so that I can use it whenever I need anything. Will that be okay? This will be the case when we are having attachments towards the worldly objects. And the worldly objects which we are enjoying through Indriyas never give us satisfaction. We need more and more. And there will be no end at all. So Parameshwaran says, hey beautiful one, Parvati, one has to concentrate on Sit Swarupa because only that has no attachments. It shines of its own. It doesn't depend on anything to shine. On the other hand, Jiva thinks it will be happy only by accumulating more and more worldly objects. So, it depends on worldly happenings and worldly objects. Only if this thing happens, I'll be happy. Naturally, that thing will also happen, but still the person will not be happy because he'll be aspiring for something else, something more. The best example I can tell you is the technological advancement. We said 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G and so on. It's going on. Generations. People say the whole world is in my hand. The whole Vedas, Shastras, Gita, Tiruvasagam, Ramayanam, Mahabharatam and whatnot. Everything is my hand. But has it entered one's mind is a great question mark. So, once we create attachments towards the worldly objects, it will not leave us. Vinayin vilaivu vinay kadal vilthidum undipara. Bhagavan says in Upadesa Undiya. Once we start doing the karma and attain the goal even, the fruits that we reap out of that karma will convince us and induce us to do more karma. And Bhagavan says that is Vinay Kadal. That is the Karma Sagara. From that, when one person is drowned in that Sagara, it's very difficult to come out because that is the seed for rebirth. Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, as Bhajagodvindam says. So, that is the seed for rebirth. And Vinay Kadal Virtidum, that will make us drown into that ocean of karma. And it's very difficult to come out of it. And will that lead us to mukti? No, not at all. Veedu tharalilai undipara. In the next stanza, Bhagavan says. So, Parameshwaran says, when Jiva concentrates completely to get attached to the Sit Swarupa only, the attachments he has towards the worldly objects will also fade away. Only when he concentrates completely on Sit Swarupa, the Anma, the Self, whatever we may call, the attachments he had towards the worldly objects will fade away by step. So, to destroy the attachments of worldly objects, one has to catch hold of that Sit Swarupa who has no attachments. Thiruvalluvar, a great saint poet, he beautifully says, Pattriha, Patratran, Patrinai, Appatrai, Pattriha, Patru Vidarku. Why should I catch hold of that Sit Swarupa which doesn't have any attachments? To relieve us from the attachments of worldly objects. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the sharing of Ramana Chatvarimshat by Sri Ujwal Jagadeesh.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. We are meditating on the verses from Ramana Chatvarimshat written by Ganapati Muni and which have been compiled in this format by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi himself. In this 20th verse, Ganapati Muni sings, Turam yahi kuvadha dharma vrishate neta param panguta दुर्भ्रान्ते भुवनं जहि परितो वर्धस्वसंसत्सता सोदर्येण समन्वितो भुवमिमां प्राप्तो गुरुग्रामणीः शूरान्तपुरनेत्र विभ्रमहरो देवो भवानी सुतः रमणाय लोक गुरवे नमः रमणाय लोक गुरवे नमः दूरसरिकुवादवे धर्मवृषभ ಕುಂಟದೆ ಸ್ಥಿರವಾಗಿ ನಿಲ್ಲಲಿದೆ ದುರ್ಭ್ರಾಂತಿಯು ಭುವನವ ಬಿಡಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲೆಡೆ ಸಜ್ಜನರ ಸಂಖ್ಯೆ ವೃದ್ಧಿಸಲಿ ಸೋದರನ ಕೂಡಿ ಭುವಿಗಿಳಿಯುತಿಹನು ಗುರುಶ್ರೇಷ್ಠನು ಸೂರನ ಮಡದಿಯರು ಕಂಡ ವಿಲಾಸ ಹರಿದ ದೇವನು ಭವಾನಿ ಸುತನು ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ ರಮಣನಿಗೆ ಲೋಕ ಗುರುವಿಗೆ ನಮನ. Ganapati Muni says, now the time has come for the kuwada, the conflict, the unwanted debate and discussions to go away, because the dharma is going to be re-established and the number of sadhu sajjana, the good people and the virtuous ones, are going to increase in manifold forms, because Subramanya, who destroyed the Sura Padman, he has come in the human form, and he has not come alone. He has come with his brother Ganapati, and Ganapati and Subramanya are the sons of none other than Mother Parvati, Uma Devi. Says Ganapati Muni, yesterday and today we are continuing the celebration of Krishna Janmashtami. When Krishna was born, we remember that Krishna, who is none other than the very self, he was born in a dungeon, in a prison where there was only darkness, and Devaki and Vasudeva were bound by chains and doors and gates which were locked. And we know as soon as Krishna was born, the chains got loosened and all the doors opened. This signifies that when the self rises and shines in its beautiful manifested form, at that moment all the bondages are broken and we become free, and we become a tool to help that divine in his divine Leela. And that is how Vasudeva took the little Krishna back to Nanda Gokula, where he had to grow. And in return, he brought none other than Durga Devi, who is Bhavani. And the Bhavani, when Kamsa came in the morning and he wanted to kill even this little girl child which was born, this girl child sprang up in the sky and revealed that it was none other than Bhavani, and told, "Oh Kamsa, your end has already been born," and he is happily growing at Nanda Gokula. Said that Bhavani, and that Bhavani, as we understand, is the very love of the self. She is the mother Apita Kuchamba she is, and she has come to reveal to the whole world that the end of the ego has come, and there is going to be an end for all this illusion that these thoughts create and are mesmerizing us. The end of those illusion, Maya is born. She announced to Kamsa and she disappeared. In the life of Bhagavan Ramana, we remember that when he left home for good from Madurai, when he started his journey towards Arunachala, there he had to get down at Vilipuram and walk a distance, and then he was very, very hungry, and he got food from a divine drummer, and before eating that food, he swooned and fell down, and he collected the food that was fallen down, and he ate the food, and he slept near a house. And the next day morning, when the dwellers of that house opened the house, Muttu Krishna Bhagavatar and his better half, they saw a divine child who was sitting outside their door, and they realized that today is Gokulashtami and Sri Krishna himself has come to our house, and they welcomed that young Venkatraman, and he was served some food, the leftover from yesterday, and later when the food was prepared, he was served the hot food, and they also gave him the funds to continue his journey to Arunachala by taking the 2 earrings, the ruby earrings that Venkatraman had, and this is the way he continued the journey. When we remember this, I remember a story which G. Kameshwarji told us in Mahabharata, when Krishna comes as the Duta to do the Sandana. He comes to Hastinapura, and Duryodhana is waiting with pomp and show, with all the royal, the maryade that has to be done, and he is waiting. And when Krishna comes, he says, "Oh Krishna, come to my house." And Krishna ignores his invitation and moves ahead. And there he sees Vidura, and Vidura says, "Oh Krishna, please come to your house." That is the devotion that Vidura had, who understood that Krishna was none other than the very avatara of Paramatma, and he invited him, and Krishna happily went to Vidura's house, and there it is said that he had the yesterday's gruel. This reminds me of Bhagavan Ramana, who had the yesterday's gruel given by a poor farmer in the Girivalam path. Happily, Krishna also rejoiced that yesterday's gruel, and he accepted the hospitality of Vidura. And G. Kameshwarji continued saying that when Krishna has come, it is not the time to rest. When Krishna has come, the war has begun. What is that war? It is the Mahabharata war. And where is this Mahabharata war happening? Not in the Kurukshetra, very, very far north of India, but that Kurukshetra war is happening within each one of us. And Ramana, who is Sri Krishna, who is the Self, who is there within, he is ever ready to begin this war and put an end to all the wars that is happening within, all the conflicts and the confusion and the kuvada, unwanted debate that is happening within. Krishna has come into our heart to destroy these conflicts and re-establish dharma and to re-establish the virtuous. And he has come not alone, just like how Krishna has come with Balarama. and how Rama came with Lakshmana. When the divine comes with his brother, there is a different synergy and there is much more good that it brings to the whole world. So Ganapati Muni says, Muruga has not come alone, he has come with his brother Ganapati, and this is going to bring the greatest good to the whole world. And Ramana says, what is the greatest good? To know yourself is the greatest good, the greatest service that you can do to the whole world. To teach us this truth, Ramana has come to our hearts, and he has born as Sri Krishna in our dark dungeon prison called the body, to reveal the light of the self. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the sharing of Sri Ramana Ashtottara, which was written by Vishwanatha Swami. This will be shared by the Manana and Ramana Ashtottara will be shared by Dr. Sarada.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. Where the immense grace of the self manifests as Ramana, in this part of the satsang, we are meditating on the Ramana Ashtottara Shatanamavali of Vishwanatha Swami, the litany of 108 names on Bhagavan Ramana. And this litany of 108 names is taking us through the life story of Bhagavan. And we have arrived at the juncture where Bhagavan, having surrendered himself completely to Arunachaleshwara, having said, Father, I have come, having thrown away all his belongings, all the earthly belongings, anything that he had, everything that he possessed, at that moment, whatever he possessed, he did not actually have any possessions. He had left home and come. And the only valuable possession which was on him, from the worldly point of view, his diamond-studded or emerald-studded earrings, those earrings he had pawned to get money to complete the last phase of the journey to Arunachala. So he didn't have anything. He had a little bit of change money left over after paying for that ticket. He had some food, the sweets given for Gokulashtami. The offering of Gokulashtami made by the devout lady and the house of Muttakrishna Bhagavatar. She had given him the offerings of sweets the very same way as she would offer it to Krishna. And Krishna anyhow does not physically eat the sweets. Krishna, the moment the sweets are offered, the moment the sweets are seen by him, he has already consumed the sweets. He has already consumed the one who has offered the sweets. And very similarly, our Ramana too did not have to physically consume those sweets which were offered. The moment they were offered, the offering had been accepted. In some cases, there are occasions where offerings are made, but they may not actually physically reach the person. There was an instance where somebody sent an offering to Sri Ramanashrama, but that offering was used for a purpose different from what the devotee had in mind while sending the offering. Another devotee knew about this and he asked Bhagavan, Bhagavan, this was offered for a particular purpose, but it is not being made use of for that purpose. Then Bhagavan said, why do you worry? The moment the offering is made, the purpose is served. The very moment the offering is made, the purpose is served. So the offering was made, the Gokulashtami offering was accepted by Bhagavan, and to show the whole world the beauty, the glory of renunciation. Tyagena eke amritatvam manashuhu. Only by renunciation can immortality be attained, can the nectar of immortality be attained, to show that everything had been renounced, everything had been thrown away, everything had been left behind, including the beautiful, glorious locks, the black locks which he had, glorious hair, very beautiful hair he had. Mother Aragamma says later, she feels, that's what everyone recounts. That also was shaven, head was shaven clean, clothes were thrown away except for one loin cloth. He had re-entered the temple. He sat there, lost in what seemed like penance. Tapas, tapomayaya namaha. Full of tapas. And Bhagavan says, tapas is abidance in the self. So that's why Vishwanatha Swami says, tapomayaya namaha. He is full of tapas. He was radiating the glory of tapas because he was only in the abidance of the self. He did not know day from night. He did not know the vermin that were eating up his thighs. Sores had been formed on the thighs. Pus and blood was oozing from those sores, but he was not aware. That's what Venkatesh reports when he says that some urchin boys were pelting stones. And he was wondering whom they were pelting stones at. He picked up some twig and ran after them, and they all dispersed. And then he saw Sheshadri Swami, heard Magan Sheshadri Swami, a great sage who was in Tiruvannamalai in those days. But the Siddha, he emerged from that 1,000-pillared hall, and Venkatachala was wondering whether the boys were pelting stones at him. And Sheshadri Swami said, no, look, there is the Chinna Swami, the younger Swami, the young Swami, the youthful Swami. And Venkatachala says he tried to see where could this young Swami be. He could not even discern where he was. Then he wondered, could he be in the Patala Lingam? And he says, I saw a child, I could slowly in that darkness, after some time, I could discern a childlike face. And he brought him out. But in those days, during that time, what was the food that was available? In the 1,000-pillared hall, Bhagwan had already received the first bhiksha from Arunachaleshwara, the first meal from Arunachaleshwara. That was old rice. Today, Ujwal Jagadeesh had referred to the old rice eaten by Sri Krishna, offered by the devotee, and by Bhagwan, later offered by the farmer. But here, the very first meal given to his child by Arunachaleshwara was many days old food, several days old food. That rice soaked in water. Bhagwan says it had been soaked so long that each grain could be seen separately. It had bloated so much. The grains of rice had bloated so much. And the water had become sour. It was in a somewhat rusted tin. And this was offered by the disciples of one Mauna Swami. That Mauna Swami took care of Bhagwan. The first meal was also sent by him through his disciples. And Bhagwan had that meal. And he was continuing to be immersed in that bliss of the self. He was in the Patala Lingam. In one account, we read that Ratnamma, the Devadasi, had spotted him even when he was in the Patala Lingam. She somehow managed to take some food to him into the dark recesses of that underground shrine. She tried to give him a clean cloth to sit on, but he did not pay any attention to it. Later, of course, Ratnama was one of the people whom Sri A.R. Natarajan refers to as those with sacred hands. And Rajkumar Bharati, in his composition, says, Ramana, you are the one who is feeding the entire universe. Entire universe. We hear of a story where Lord Shiva and Parvati were seated next to each other, and just a moment Shiva disappeared and came back. And then Parvati asked, what were you doing, O Lord? I went to give food to the entire universe, he says. And Parvati naughtily opens her palm to see there is a big ant which she was holding there, to see how Shiva would feed that ant. And when she opened it, she was amazed to see that ant had a grain of sugar in its mouth. So that is the way that the Lord feeds everyone. There is an old film song which says, Kallinul Thereikku, Karappai Uyirikku. Food is given to the child inside the womb. Food is provided by God to the child inside the womb. Food is provided by God to the toad, which is there inside a rock. Some of the rocks, when sculptors break them open, or maybe when builders break them open, they find a toad inside the rock. Now, how did that toad survive over there? But food is provided by the Supreme One. He who provides food to the entire universe, these blessed people, like the Mauna Swami, like Ratnama, they could provide food to the Lord of the universe. So food was there sometimes. But Bhagavan said later when he was asked, what about food, Bhagavan? Because food is so important for us. Hunger, thirst, the fulfillment of hunger and thirst are so important. They are so important that Sadhu Om Swami says, if we get to that place, oh Ramana, one day you will surely take us there. That is the land of the heart. That place, there will be no hunger. There will be no thirst. So that is the place. Kondu Selvare Orudinam Idaya Guhayil. In that kingdom, there will be neither hunger nor thirst. In that kingdom, in that tapas, in the bliss of that kingdom, in the glory of that kingdom, this young boy Ramana was immersed. And he was inside that Patala Lingam. It's like we felt in a way Bhagavan when he had his death experience, the death. And then sannyasa, renunciation of everything, shaving of the head, almost the rites of sannyasa, of renunciation, which means new birth. So the new birth, where does it happen? Birth happens in a womb. And it is described by our Shastras as a terrible experience. Many are those who pray, please do not push me back into the womb, into any womb. Marubadiyum karuvadayum kuriyil thalli varuttapadutha vendam. Don't make me suffer by pushing me into the pit of the womb. Endru tharuvaai annai vayittril Guhai Namah Shivaya sings. Annai vayittril uru varamal ayya kanpar. Let me never come back in a mother's womb. But here, this child of bliss was in this underground womb. So like a womb only, because dark, hardly any air, minimum air over there, because even otherwise it's underground, and those days it was dilapidated, so mud and stone and everything. And vermin, I mean, inside the womb, it would be dark and it would be very, very hot. So we can imagine Tiruvannamalai, very, very hot place. So inside that place, without any movement of air, wind, nothing, must have been really hot. Even now, if one goes into the Virupaksha cave, one finds it so hot. Inside a cave itself, it's like being inside a womb. So Bhagavan was here. And we can imagine there was blood and pus oozing from his own body. But when the child is in the womb, there is blood and there is various bile and all kinds of things surrounding that fetus in the. So it was like that. But what is spoken of as a hellish experience of being in the womb, Bhagavan was in that like a child of bliss only, pure bliss. To establish that every aspect of life which seems to be sorrowful, which seems to be an insurmountable difficulty, a period of real suffering, gets converted into pure peace and bliss. Absolute bliss if one abides in the self. The glory of self-abidance, every moment of Bhagavan's life proclaims. Tapomayaya Namaha, says Vishwanatha Swami. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana. We will now have the chanting of Aksharamanamalai by Srimati V. Radha.
Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala, தேடாதுற்றனல் திருவருணிதியகத்தியக்கம் தீர்த்தருளருணாச்சலாம் தைரியமோடும் உண்மைய நாடையந்தட்டழிந்தேன் அருளருணாச்சலா தொட்டருட்கைமை கட்டிடாயனிலிய நட்டமாவேன் அருளருணாச்சலாம் தோடமில் நீயகத்தோடொன்று என்றும் சந்தோடம் ஒன்றிட அருளருணாச்சலா நகைக்கிடமில்லை நின் நாடிய எனை அருணகையிட்டு பாணி அருணாச்சலாம் நானிலை நாடிட நானாயொன்றினி ஸ்தாணுவ நின்றனை அருணாச்சலாம் நின்னெறி எரித்தென்னை நீராக்கிடும் உன் நின்னருள் மழை பொழி அருணாச்சலாம் நீனானர புலி நிதங்கடி மயமா நின்றிட நிலை அருள் அருணாச்சலா நுண்ணுரு உன்னையான் விண்ணுரு நன்னிட எண்ணலையிருமென்றருணாச்சலாம் நூலறிவறியா பேதையன் எந்தன் மாலறிவருத்தருளருணாச்சலா நெக்கு நெக்குருகியான் புக்கிட உன்னை புகழக்க நான் நின்றனை அருணாச்சலாம் நேசமில் எனக்கு உன் ஆசையை காட்டி நீ மோசம் செய்யாதருள் அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம் அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலாம் அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா அருணாச்சல சிவ அருணாச்சலா
अरुणाचल शिव अरुणाचला अरुणाचलं வாழி அன்பர்களும் வாழி அக்ஷரமணமாலை வாழி. நமோ ரமண.
Namo Ramana. We conclude today's satsang with the Ashtottara puja. The Ashtottara puja will be done at Dileep Simha's altar by Sri Dileep Simha. The Ashtottara chanting will be done by Revathi and Uma and Ashwini. Namo Ramana. द्वाज विश्वनाथ विरचितं श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनामावली अपार सच्चित्सुखवारिराशेः यस्योर्मिमात्रं भुवनं समस्तं गुहाहितं तं रमणं गभीरं चिन्ताविहीनं हृदि चिन्तयामि. ॐ महासेनमहोंशेन जाताय नमः. ॐ श्रीरमणाय नमः. ॐ गुरवे नमः. ॐ अखण्डसंविदाकाराय नमः. ॐ महौजसे नमः. ॐ कारणोद्भवाय नमः. ॐ जगद्धितावताराय नमः. ॐ श्रीभूमिनाथस्थलोस्थिताय नमः. ॐ पराशरकुलोत्तंसाय नमः. ॐ सुन्दरार्यतपःफलाय नमः. ॐ कमनीयसुचारित्राय नमः. ॐ सहायाम्बा सहायवते नमः. ॐ शोणाचलमहोलीनमानसाय नमः. ॐ स्वर्णहस्तकाय नमः. ॐ श्रीमद्वादशान्तमहास्थले लब्धविद्योदयाय नमः. ॐ महाशक्तिनिपातेन प्रबुद्धाय नमः. ॐ परमार्थविदे नमः. ॐ तीव्राय नमः. ॐ पितृपदान्वेषिणे नमः. ॐ इन्दुमौलिना पितृमते नमः. ॐ पितुरादेशतः शोणशैलं प्राप्ताय नमः. ॐ तपोमयाय नमः. ॐ उदासीनाय नमः. ॐ महायोगिने नमः. ॐ महोत्साहाय नमः. ॐ कुशाग्रधिये नमः. ॐ शान्तसङ्कल्पसंरम्भाय नमः. ॐ सुसन्दृशे नमः. ॐ सवित्रे नमः. ॐ स्थिराय नमः. ॐ तपक्षपितसर्वाङ्गाय नमः. ॐ फुल्लाम्बुजविलोचनाय नमः. ॐ चन्द्रिकासितहासश्रीमण्डिताननमण्डलाय नमः. ॐ चूतवाट्यां समासीनाय नमः. ॐ चूर्णिताखिलविभ्रमाय नमः. ॐ वेदवेदान्ततत्त्वज्ञाय नमः. ॐ चिन्मुद्रिणे नमः. ॐ त्रिगुणातिगाय नमः. ॐ विरूपाक्षगुहावासाय नमः. ॐ विराजदचलाकृतये नमः. ॐ उद्दीप्तनयनाय नमः. ॐ पूर्णाय नमः. ॐ रचिताचलताण्डवाय नमः. ॐ गम्भीराय नमः. ॐ परमाचार्याय नमः. ॐ सुप्रसन्नाय नमः. ॐ अभयप्रदाय नमः. ॐ दक्षिणास्यनिभाय नमः. ॐ धीराय नमः. ॐ दक्षिणाभिमुखाय नमः. ॐ स्वराजे नमः. ॐ महर्षये नमः. ॐ भगवते नमः. ॐ ईड्याय नमः.
ॐ भूमविद्याविशारदाय नमः. ॐ विमलाय नमः. ॐ दीर्घदर्शिने नमः. ॐ आप्ताय नमः. ॐ ऋजुमार्गप्रदर्शकाय नमः. ॐ समदृशे नमः. ॐ सत्यदृशे नमः. ॐ सत्याय नमः. ॐ प्रशान्ताय नमः. ॐ अमितविक्रमाय नमः ॐ सुकुमाराय नमः ॐ सदानन्दाय नमः ॐ मृदुभाषिणे नमः ॐ दयार्णवाय नमः ॐ श्री शोणाचलहृद्भूतस्कन्दाश्रमनिकेतनाय नमः ॐ सद्दर्शनोपदेष्ट्रे नमः ॐ सद्भक्तवृन्दपरिवृताय नमः ॐ गणेशमुनिभृङ्गेन सेविताङ्घ्रिसरोरुहाय नमः ॐ गीतोपदेशसारादिग्रन्थसञ्चिन्न संशयाय नमः ॐ वर्णाश्रममतातीताय नमः ॐ रसज्ञाय नमः ॐ सौम्याय नमः ॐ आत्मवते नमः ॐ सर्वावनिमतस्थानाम् आराध्याय नमः ॐ सर्वसद्गुणिने नमः ॐ आत्मारामाय नमः ॐ महाभागाय नमः ॐ मातृमुक्तिविधायकाय नमः ॐ विनताय नमः ॐ विनुताय नमः ॐ विप्राय नमः ॐ मुनीन्द्राय नमः ॐ पावकोज्ज्वलाय नमः ॐ दर्शनादगसंहारिणे नमः ॐ मौनेन स्वात्मबोधकाय नमः ॐ ऋचान्तिकरसान्निध्याय नमः ॐ स्मरणात् बन्धमोचकाय नमः ॐ अन्तस्तिमिरचण्डांशवे नमः ॐ संसारार्णवतारकाय नमः ॐ शोणाद्रीशस्तुतिद्रष्टे नमः ॐ हार्दविद्याप्रकाशकाय नमः ॐ अविच्युतनिजप्रज्ञाय नमः ॐ नैसर्गिकमहातपसे नमः ॐ कमण्डलुधराय नमः ॐ शुभ्रकौपीनवसनाय नमः ॐ गुहाय नमः ॐ दण्डपाणये नमः ॐ कृपापूर्णाय नमः ॐ भवरोगविषग्वराय नमः ॐ स्कन्दाय नमः ॐ देवतमाय नमः ॐ अमर्त्याय नमः ॐ सेनान्ये नमः ॐ पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः।
ॐ श्रीरमणभगवते नमः। श्रीरमणाष्टोत्तरशतनामपूजां समर्पयामि। यस्थाणोररुणाचलस्य पदयोः स्मृत्या जनिं प्राप्यत दिव्यानुग्रहसुप्रवाहविवशस्तादात्म्यभावं गतः हृन्निष्ठस्वगभीरनित्यतपसा लोकान् पुनास्येकराट् तस्मै श्रीरमणाय ते नम इदं लोकोत्तरज्योतिषे। नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि दर्शन सुख मंगल मुख सकल जीवहित सम्मुख ब्रह्म संकीये सदा तुष्ट सदा हृष्ट सदा शिवानंद पुष्ट परम महर्षि ब्रह्मनिष्ठ समदर्शी नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि ನಮ್ಮ ಮನವದೊಂದು ಕಾಡು ನೀನರಿತಿಹೆ ಅದರ ಜಾಡು ಹಿತವನರಿತು ನೀಡುತ್ತೆಮ್ಮ ಕೊರೆಯ ತಣಿಸಲೈ ಬೇಡಲೆಂದು ಬಂದ ನಾವು ನೋಡಿಯೇ ತಣಿವೆವಯ್ಯ ಮೋಡಿಗಾರನೇ ಹಿತವ ನುಡಿದು ಪೊರೆ ನಮ್ಮನು ಬ್ರಹ್ಮ ಸಂಘಿಯೇ ನಮೋ 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 ರಮಣ ಸದಾಶಿವ प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि नमो 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 रमण सदाशिव प्रभावरण नमो महर्षि नमो महर्षि भगवान श्री रमण महर्षि की
जय